Thank you very much. My name is Michael Lindsey, and I'm from Berkeley Law. My colleague Joe Serra developed this presentation but had to stay home due to some illness in his family. My plan was to stand here silently, mute, while he did the talking, but here we are. So apologies in advance if my preparation feels a bit rushed. So a bit of background, we are a very small shop, technically. I'm kind of the only coder there and do some, I move all the metadata between our systems. We've had an abiding, interest in linked data as a kind of object from afar, but haven't had a practical project to really work on. We also have a set of helper applications that manage the metadata for our faculty authors. We're transitioning to using a hosted Wikibase instead, a Wikibase instance to manage that metadata. Our faculty scholarship is in our repository, which is running in Tind software, which also provides our ILS, and it has APIs in and out that we can use. Our catalogers have a MARC background, and any BibFrame training has up to now been undertaken solo. The law library made linked data a staff training priority about 6 months ago, and we joined Share VDE, which is a set of linked data services built in collaboration with members such as PIN, and Jim is here, I believe, as well as the Library of Congress and the National Libraries of Finland and Norway. Like many, we realized that Wikidata was a friendly fit for staff training around linked data and chose to spin up a hosted Wikibase to start modeling the metadata around our faculty authors. Currently, we're using a Google Sheet, which we download to a TSV and then have cron jobs run against to create caches. We chose a fresh Wikibase so we could muck around without worrying about accidents, and we created a distinct set of name authorities for our repository to make sure we didn't introduce noise into the ILS. Staff could contribute to a real project and start picking up some of the linked data technologies as we went along. And I could play with the Wikibase and Wikidata REST API and the older Action API that Wikibase uses. We could write logic to push and pull metadata from Wikidata and Wikibase, then publish the results as XML back into our IR catalog. And if we did it right, we could save staff time and improve our data in all three places. So we have 150 plus faculty or so in a repository of their scholarship, which also includes our student journals and some other things like podcasts and whatnot. We use the Wikidata QID as our authority identifier, which lets us hook into other projects. Right now, the scope of the project is just Berkeley Law authors, though we may expand that in the future. And in legal scholarship, in the US at least, DOIs are not the norm for publishing articles, and the preferred citation style doesn't account for including DOIs in citations. So we've got a bit of a knowledge domain impediment there to some of the uptake of linked data stuff. Law in the United States is also having trouble, at least legal scholarship, with the adoption of ORCID. So to recap, our repository is a vendor Tind, and it's a MARC-based system, or at least it appears that way to all of the staff users. And we're using Wikibase as the cloud host for our sort of local authorities, and then I've written some scripts that essentially use curl under the hood against the Action API in Wikibase and the REST API in Wikidata. So I'm finding the Action API generally usable. The documentation is still kind of hard to use, but it make it easier as I use it more. Maybe I'll have to use it more. We use the API in a very unsophisticated way at the moment. I'm still learning. Right now, I haven't written out all of the methods that we're going to need to if we were to develop this into a general use application. Right now, the only API calls and methods that I've implemented are just serve this direct purpose that I'm describing. The REST API, the documentation is a lot easier to use, and you're able to play with it in the sandbox there in the Open API interface. So that's our person page there on the left. That's the data model for our fundamental entity that we're describing. And then on the right there is the enumeration of the properties that we need in order to conduct our project. Of course, the property numbers are going to differ from the ones that they might correspond to in Wikidata. This is a little bit of the MARC view about where those Wikidata and Wikibase identifiers end up. And I should note that for any catalogers in the room, those aren't 700s; those should be 100s in the authority records in MARC. And this is the MARC XML view. So our vendor Tend is devoting significant time, staff time, to moving ahead with linked data, and they have a JSON LD with schema.org syndication that we're using, and we're hoping to see more from them in the future, especially as we continue our work with ShareVDE and Sinopia and staff BibFrame learning. We're hoping that our vendor is ready and meets us there when we're ready to take the next steps in that application. So we have local properties that just stay in Wikibase. The position held property is not yet implemented because we have to give some thought to mapping. There are ranks and titles associated with each faculty position that would probably need to be separated into two different properties. Then it is likely that the various ranks would need to be grouped and generalized to accurately map onto the position held property in Wikidata P39. And our IR authority name form property allows us to modify the name in our applications when the preferred form is more complicated than just family name and given name. So we hold a property back there so that we can make any modifications there that always seem to crop up. So this is the name that goes into the repository authority. There you go. So this is the workflow for for one of the use cases for the script where we add a new person. In Wikidata, we create the QID if it doesn't already exist. We add the affiliation, the start time for employment, the org ID, the LC identifier, and then in Wikibase, we create the corresponding record, including the Wikidata hook QID, and then we add our local profile URL and CV URLs. And then our script does the pushing and pulling between Wikidata and Wikibase, IR authority, including the org ID, the LC ID, the CV URL, and profile URL. And then we publish that as XML back into our IR in using their write API. We have something that we're looking to implement in the future. We're looking for a way to, let's see, I'm going to skip that. All right, so our second use case, I'm going to have a sip of water. So the second case for the script is if the faculty member that we're working with is already exists, and we just need to simply update the fields. So it's just a simple variation of the steps I described there as far as comparing, and which brings us to the notion of conflicts. So in the event of a collision of present and conflicting properties, where the properties are present in both systems but they don't match, we give the operator of the script an opportunity to skip it or to overwrite our Wikibase with the Wikidata value. So we're not overwriting existing Wikidata properties in the event of a conflict. That's where we back off and have the operator do any kind of research, bibliographic research, to reconcile the conflict. And there would be, we're considering doing batch updating of the IR records, the bibliographic records, essentially using this application to push authority control back into our IR and then propagate those changes further down into the actual bibliographic records, but we haven't gotten there yet. So as an example, we've got one faculty member here, Alan Auerbach. Here he is in Wikidata. It's a full record. It's nice. Let's see. Different OS, different clicks. This is our Wikibase. Entry for the same author. Wonderful. Look at these property labels are all in German. This is wonderful. And then this is how he appears. Hopefully not in Berkeley. Yeah. This is always the risk, isn't it? And then, so this is how the script is invoked. Whoops. So we invoke it with the Wikibase entity ID, and with a little bash you can do a list of them all at once. And then we have console output that helps the operator of the script. It gives the essentials of which entities are in play and any changes that are happening to the data. And then it shows you a full curl command that pushes the XML to the IR. And then we have a more verbose output that is logged to file. Initially, the console output was just a dump of debugging checks for me, but we needed to make it useful instead to Joe, the person who would be running the script. So we log to file anything that is more appropriate for debugging, and there's plenty to debug. So we found that the usability and scriptability of the Action and REST APIs may make more projects possible, like a journal information database that we've dreamed about for many years, including journal abbreviations, which end up being a particular thing in legal scholarship, maybe in other knowledge domains as well. Also maybe a controlled vocabulary service for item types and some subject tagging as well. We're avoiding an author's affiliation for now, meaning, for example, this author is affiliated with Berkeley Law, but we will likely build out our logic to take advantage of the P108 Wikidata property for the start and stop times for employment, and when we do that, we'll build other helper methods for qualifiers and claims, etc. Faculty departure hasn't been considered, but we are looking to add an end time qualifier at some point. This allows us to keep the entry without worrying about muddying the data. Deceased authors will likely be used in the same way. For deceased faculty, Joe is adding an end time and a link to the Wayback Machine version of the profile page, since the listed profile URL associated with Berkeley Law will no longer exist. And about the latency, we were seeing lag times between the Wikidata and Wikibase APIs, where we see updates on the web as expected, and we see those updates with a timestamp in the change logs, but the Sparkle endpoint and the APIs were returning stale values. This just means that we need to provide for that in the logic of the script somehow, possibly using the HTTP tags. I'm not exactly sure. We're not quite there yet, or we'll just have to ensure for now that the script isn't run for the same person more than once a day. And that's it for my rushed prepared presentation. Thank you for your patience, and if there are any questions, I'd be happy to talk more about the project.
Thank you very much for this great presentation, and I'm happy to take questions.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I was wondering how you collaborated with the Wiki community on this. Did you have any contact with the Wikimedia Foundation on this? Or did you get any feedback on any of the lemmas that you created on Wikidata?
Any of the what that we created?
Well, you did create Wikidata QIDs. And I was wondering if you did get any feedback on that, positive or negative.
I would ask probably my partner Joe if he were here to answer that. He does the Wikidata creation. He does the QIDs, instantiates those in Wikidata. I believe he has had some interaction with that community, mostly on a sort of idea development around this project. I've only interfaced with the Wikidata community, to my shame, as just trying to fix this problem that I would run into with APIs. So I've got, the Wikibase user community has been very, very helpful. You just need one person who knows how to do it, and if it's undocumented. So it's been crucial. So without that one person, the project wouldn't have gotten off the ground.
So you didn't use any of the resources available by the foundation?
I didn't personally, other than their public-facing APIs.
I know this might be a question for Joe, but do you know about what percentage of the data was batch loaded versus what percentage was manually done by your catalogers or Joe or other people? I guess what part was boutique and what part was batch?
So this function has sort of accreted over the years from a number of data sources and had become, like I said, a Google Sheet. And when we spun up our Wikibase .cloud instance, I scripted this was one of the reasons why I developed this PHP curl wrapper, was to be able to pump that data, that TSV essentially, into some mapped properties, so that it was batch created from that TSV using a PHP curl wrapper that was the sort of birth of this project.
Okay, perhaps one question from me. I wonder how this Wikibase hosting worked. Did you have a seamless migration process to new versions of Wikibase, or what did you have to do to keep this running?
I believe we looked at doing this ourselves. If that is even possible to install Wikibase locally, I don't even know. But we instead, I encountered this project when that step was already chosen when we were doing the hosted solution. If that answers your question, I'm sorry if I misunderstand.